Well, let's get more now, and we can speak to Rana Mitter, who's a professor of the history and politics of modern China at Oxford University. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Um, some progress towards a trade deal by the sounds of things. Could we be looking at a deal by the end of the year, do you think?
I think end of the year may be optimistic, although clearly there is some slow, steady movement in the right direction, largely because the EU and China have been talking about this for many, many years. But there are some fundamental issues, and if I had to sum them up in one phrase, it's market access. Essentially, the European Union still feels that China has relative freedom of movement within European markets, but it's still very difficult for Western firms, European firms, to get in and actually get the same kind of reciprocal access in China itself. And significant figures in countries such as Germany, which has a very long trading relationship with China, have been making their voices heard on that particular question.
And just to help us understand, what would this deal actually change as far as European nations are concerned?
I think that the aim is that it would provide a whole variety of new, smoother mechanisms, first of all, to allow foreign investment into China and also the involvement of foreign firms in certain key sectors. The thing is that a very large number of the sectors in which there's more Chinese willingness to allow access are what you might call, if not the industries of the past, at least the ones that are not necessarily the most cutting edge. So the automotive sector, automobiles, will be one of those. That's a fairly established technology. The issue is that it still does very little to try and get European presence in the high-tech, communications, and cyber sectors, which, of course, are really where lots of the wins of the future are going to be made.
Professor, up until now, we've talked about the sort of the issues at stake with regards to the rule of the game being trade. But there are other issues, aren't there, like human rights concerns, pollution, claims of China spreading disinformation across Europe, which incidentally China denies. Not easy conversations to be had. And clearly, European leaders are going to have to tread or are having to tread extremely carefully, aren't they?
Well, not all of them are treading so carefully. Very interesting was the visit of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi to Germany just a few days ago, where essentially his press conference with Foreign Minister of Germany Heiko Maas was actually rather more acerbic than you might expect. Heiko Maas made it clear that the European Union in general and Germany in particular would continue to have a lot of things to say on the questions of human rights and also on the question of information transparency when it relates to COVID and other issues. I think Minister Wang Yi was rather surprised to see actually such sharp language being used in front of him. They're more used to sort of rather smoother diplomatic talk. So while Europe does tread carefully, I would say that perhaps this is less true now than it was before the COVID pandemic. Europe is beginning to speak out.
And do you think either side is going into those talks in a position of strength? Because let's face it, Beijing's ties with Washington are fairly fraught, and therefore Brussels and the European Union might be a logical and highly important focus for Beijing to sort of shift towards.
Both sides are going into the talks wondering whether they have to flip a coin as to whether President Biden or President Trump will be in charge after November. Basically, the Europeans are trying to hedge against the fact that if Trump continues as president, then their possibility of really having an integrated global trading order may be put under further attack, as it has been in Trump's first term. The Chinese are also betting that if there is essentially a Biden presidency, there might actually be a stronger Western alliance in areas from trade to defense to human rights and values that actually can speak with a more coordinated voice against China than is the case under President Trump, who doesn't really spend a lot of time thinking about issues like human rights. So both sides, I think, are trying to get something in there before the moment of destiny in November, when the new US president, and whoever it is, decides which path that both sides will take.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. We're out of time. Professor Rana Mitter at Oxford University, thank you very much indeed for speaking to France 24.